Welcome to another Random Talk Sunday, and today we're going to be looking at well, you can technically call it a really recent film that came out. Um, and it's also been in theaters for only a certain amount of time. I don't know if it did open this weekend or not, but regardless, let's discuss Mission Impossible Rogue Nation. This was a film that I did previously talk about when I was addressing all the films that were coming out within this summer. And I kind of did want to kind of touch on the various films that are coming out around this time of year. Because usually I focus on films that have existed within the past or in the recent past, and I thought it would be interesting to discuss one that's kind of in the now. So yeah, if you haven't seen Rogue Nation, definitely go check it out. But if that's just what you want to hear, it's worthy of seeing. Then yes, I think this film is. Um, but uh, but before I go into what exactly this film is about, so far the critical as well as audience praise severely outweighs the negative overall. I think there's been some people who've been picky, but personally, when you know that this is a Mission Impossible film, at least for me, I don't try to judge it on the level of an Oscar film, because I know Mission Impossible is just designed to be Mission Impossible. So there's obviously good ones within the series. I think there's actually been more good ones actually than bad ones. I mean, the worst probably being in the series is the second film. Um, but yeah, this one is definitely within the tops, um, because it's what you, I think, would expect, and kind of tries to branch out a little as far as a Mission Impossible movie. So basically, we have the main character, Ethan Hunt, played by none other than Tom Cruise. Um, and basically, he's kind of left out in the cold, because the IMF, the organization that he is a part of, is being considered up for basically termination, so to speak, because there's been a lot of accidents that have occurred as a result, and the US government is kind of going, yeah, we probably shouldn't have these guys roaming around everywhere, um, and causing all of these problems. So you have that end going on, where basically he's sort of left out into the cold, and he's kind of wanted. So he's not really sent on a mission so much as he's kind of being terminated from being sent out to do a mission, even though he's kind of just out there, um, without certain people really knowing about his whereabouts. Um, which is something interesting, because usually in a lot of these movies they really set up, like similar with James Bond, you set up a mission, you go out and you accomplish it. You're never really on your own, and you're the people that sent you out to do the mission are not trying to, kind of get you back in and say, hey, you can't do any work anymore. So there's that perspective going on, and that plays a role in the plot, as well as the other important element of this plot, and where the villains are sort of introduced, is this new threat called the Syndicate. And I don't want to give away exactly what it is without people being able to see the film for themselves. But that's basically what Ethan Hunt finds himself in. And you will see how and sort of why that is when you ultimately end up deciding to watch this film. Now, as as far as the action and the storyline goes, it's actually rather impressive. There's a lot of stunt work that Tom Cruise, you could tell he was committed to his role, and he wanted to showcase a lot of interesting interesting things that could be done. And although it's sort of standard in the as far as the action is concerned, with you see what you would expect out of a Mission Impossible film, um, and you ultimately see that really delivered well in this film. Um, it's not trying to be, I think, too outlandish. You'll see good stunt work, and you'll see some interesting ways into and scenarios that they get into as far as action sequences are concerned. Um, but it's, I think, not as of the same, I guess you could say, caliber, like when they were in, I believe it was Dubai, on top of that really crazy tall building. Although they do try to open up with a very uh, they do kind of try to open up with the action right away. Um, I don't know if that really sets. I think it sets the tone really well for the film. Although I think some people might have preferred to have it as part of the climax, or part of a more in-depth part of the film, I guess you could say. Like having it actually play a role in the plot, whereas the big sort of crazy action sequence sort of opens up in the beginning within this film. But I think it's kind of good that they're sort of mixing it up a bit, and they're not trying to maintain this certain level of predictability. So I think it only makes sense that they would open up with a bigger action sequence. And there's been other films like this that have done similar things, like James Bond, they'll open with a big action sequence. So I think overall the action and the pacing of it really does ultimately end up working to the film's advantage. Um, and the storyline is interesting because not only is he sort of out on his own, but then sort of ends up getting a little bit of help. Um, but he also is confronted with someone who is sort of changing sides, and you'll sort of see how that ends up playing into the film. So not only is there an introduction of new characters, but there's also um, characters we're more familiar with. So it jives itself out really well as, I think, a sequel, or at least what you would expect from a sequel as far as the story is concerned. And there's this one person who does sort of change sides, and you kind of see the reasoning behind it. And I think it ultimately ends up jiving well with the overall experience and the overall impact that the movie ends up leaving with, or at least leaving the audience member with. So overall, this film, I think, really does work for a Mission Impossible film. I really don't want to give too much away as to what happens, and what really ends up taking place. But I will say I think it is a very enjoyable ride. If you've liked the previous Mission Impossible movies, uh, like the more recent ones, I think you will find Rogue Nation to be enjoyable. Um, I don't think it's the best within the series, but I would say that it is trying to approach that, because it is trying to do unique things that the other films didn't really touch upon, at least. So I think if you go in with a perspective of seeing something familiar, but then also maybe seeing some interesting things that did not exist within the previous films to be thrown in there, then I think you can find some enjoyment out of this. However, if you really want something that just stands out and blows you away and just blows your expectations out of the water, this isn't, I think, a film that's designed to do that. It's just designed to give its audience what it wants, and then on top of that, maybe a little bit more, um, added on that you don't really see a lot of the time in these kinds of films. But it's not trying to push the envelope, I think, too far. Because I think it wants to maintain this familiarity, because people are, I think, like the idea of having something new, but then having something that they can gravitate towards too, that they've seen a lot of times over. So this film does provide that, I think, for the audience. But it doesn't provide you with one or the other. It provides you sort of a mix of both. But I think that's really ultimately all I can say in regards to Mission Impossible Rogue Nation. But if there are any questions, comments, concerns, I'd be more than happy to answer them. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you all have a pleasant day, week, month, and year, and I hope to see you all in the next video. Take care.